Weissmann would just sit back in his chair and say, F the evidence, I don't care, indict the guy. He's just a sick guy, in my view, completely corrupt and morally, ethically bankrupt. One of their informants had come in and admitted to that murder, told them flat out that Michael Sessa had nothing to do with it. They refused to dismiss the charges. Almost all of the relevant evidence that would have proved his innocence was withheld from him. And I said, how can you laugh about this? He said, because Weissmann is so evil, there's no other reaction you can have but to laugh. They say, well, the government's aware of their obligations. And I always say, yeah, they're aware of their obligations. They just have no intention of fulfilling them. She wrote a lengthy, almost treatise about how bad this corruption was, how deeply it went, and all of that. And still nobody was held accountable for it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end, my friends. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. And today I have a special request and a prayer that I will continue after this is over. I'm going to have a very important guest on today. He's an attorney. His name is David Schoen. And he's a pretty well-known attorney. He's been around for quite a long time now, doing some great things. And he's one of the good ones out there. And I mean, really good one, because he stands up for his clients and what he believes in. And he represents a very dear friend of mine, Michael Sessa, and who's been behind bars now for over 33 years. And it's a terrible, terrible injustice what's gone on with him. And you might have seen the posting, the video that I did about Andrew Weissmann, who I believe is one of the most despicable human beings that ever walked the face of the earth. Bad guy, destroys people's lives, frames people, does everything that you can imagine. I did this whole video on him. I want you to watch it. But he was the one that impacted my friend, Michael Sessa, got him behind bars, shouldn't be there. He should be on the street, tried to destroy his life, destroy his family and everything else. And David is representing Michael, and his next plan is to somehow appeal to, to Donald Trump to see through this injustice, this terrible injustice that's been going on now for over 33 years, and hopefully be able to give Michael the justice that he deserves. And it goes for Vic Arena too, who was, you probably know, he was a former associate of mine. He's in jail too. He should be out. I mean, these men are suffering. They've suffered in a way that you can't even imagine. And I know what it is to be put behind bars for a crime you didn't commit. Not me. I did my time for a crime that I did commit, but my dad did 40 years on a crime that he did not commit, destroyed our entire family. And these people should not be allowed to do this. People in government should not be allowed to destroy people's lives. They're there for a purpose. And the purpose is to uphold justice and uphold the laws, not to subvert them and go along with them because they want to frame people and destroy their lives. Shouldn't be happening. Shouldn't be done. So David is going to talk about this case in particular. Michael Sessa is going to talk about it. He's going to tell you the injustice that was done by Andrew Weissmann, the FBI, Greg Scarpa, Lin DeVecchio, people you might be familiar with, the corrupt FBI agent that engaged in murders. He murdered, along with Greg Scarpa, a captain in my family, the Colombo family. These two men instigated the entire Third Colombo War. And many of my friends were killed and put behind bars, and they shouldn't have been. These people, the FBI actually instigated the Colombo War. And the proof is there. And I'm going to tell you something, people. I am not somebody that just throw things out there. I have proof of this. I have evidence of this. And after we work on this with Michael Sessa, my dear friend, and David explains to you what happens in that case, we're going to take this a step further. I'm going to show you how corrupt the FBI was back then, how many lives that they destroyed. And this goes beyond what you can even imagine. Even imagine how they, in order to hide their corruption, they very possibly caused the death of 3,000 innocent people. And I'm not going to play my hand at this point in time. We're going to get into it a little bit further. We have people like Andrew Weissmann, who, to me, I'm sorry, the scum of the earth. Bad, bad, bad guy. James Comey, Lin DeVecchio. Bad people. These are bad people. The fact that they took Andrew Weissmann and put him on the Mueller investigation should tell you how much these people wanted to destroy Donald Trump, because Andrew Weissmann would do anything. He would suborn perjury. He would hold back information. He would create lies in order to convict somebody, and then he'll brag about it afterwards. He's the scum of the earth, people. And you see, when I get uptight like this, you know that there's a reason. And I don't speak out. I would love to have Andrew Weissmann on. I would love to. You know what? It's like maybe unlike some other people, on social media, influencers, when I say I have information and I want to face the people I'm accusing, I want to do it because I'll back it up with facts and with evidence. And I think some of you know what I'm talking about, what I'm leading into. But listen, with no further delay on this, I want to introduce David Schoen, great attorney, representing my dear friend Michael Sessa, who should be out of prison. He does not belong there, and I hope we can appeal to our president who knows right from wrong, who understands justice, who knows how corrupt this system could be. He's been a victim of it. And I hope that, he looks into this case and really does the right thing here because my friend should be home. Okay, with no further delay, David Schoen. All right, David, really a pleasure to meet you. And thank you very much for coming on. As you know, I have a very dear friend of mine that's been away for a long time. And I know you're the attorney that's handling it for him. And I'm sure you might have seen the video that I did on Weissmann and all the lead up to this. And I'd really like to get into what I consider the injustice that's happened in Michael Sessa's case. So if we
Sure.
can start with that a little bit, you begin wherever you think it's appropriate. And let's get into it.
Thanks very much. And thanks for having me on. It's a very important subject. I've said that this case is the single most corrupt example of corruption in the Department of Justice of any case in history. And I really believe that. It shouldn't be surprising to anyone who knows anything about Andrew Weissmann, because I've also said and believe that, in my view, he's the single most ethically bankrupt prosecutor I've ever come across, let's say, in my experience. Back in the day, when he was operating in the Eastern District of New York, some of the lawyers, including Jerry Shargell and others, referred to him as the pathological liar from the Saturday Night Live character. And that's really how he operated. They would tell stories about him not giving something up in discovery, but then planting it on the lawyer's desk during the trial, saying the lawyer had it all the time. And he's really behind this Michael Sessa, Vicarina prosecution, the so-called Colombo prosecution back then, along with John Gleason and others who had, maybe similar ethical perspectives. End justifies the means in their view, but Andrew Weissmann really stands out. So, I don't know how much detail you want to go into about the case, but Michael Sessa has been in prison now for over 33 years for a crime he did not commit. Some evidence of that I would suggest to you is, for example, he was convicted of a murder. A person named Mr. Coluccio. His widow, Mr. Coluccio's widow, has said from day one that she knows that Michael Sessa did not commit that murder, period, end of story. But there are so many things that demonstrate the corruption in this case. I'll skip ahead for one moment. Later on, many years later, when some of the corruption was being exposed, Andrew Weissmann was singled out by Chief Judge Sifton in an order in which he found that Weissmann's ethical view was so myopic that he really should be reported to the bar for not turning over things. In fact, in this case, another assistant United States attorney gave an affidavit saying that she approached Weissmann about evidence that should have been turned over in her view, and that he said, no, that's not something that had to be turned over. And that was his default, apparently, always not turning over exculpatory and impeachment evidence. So in Michael Sessa's case, even before he was charged in the case he was convicted of, he was set up in a case which they knew was false. He was accused of dressing up as a Hasidic Jew and committing another murder, even though the prosecutors know that someone else, one of their informants, had come in and admitted to that murder, and it told them flat out that Michael Sessa had nothing to do with it. They refused to dismiss the charges. Eventually, it fell of its own weight, but the same people were involved, Andrew Weissmann and others. Anyway, in this case, he was charged with a murder and convicted in relatively short trial, and almost all of the relevant evidence that would have proved his innocence was withheld from him. And in fact, when just some of that evidence came out after his trial, every other defendant who was facing charges for the so-called Colombo War was acquitted when that evidence was used and put before the jury. 4 different cases. So that just gives you sort of a thumbnail sketch. But for example, in Michael's case, We found out long afterwards, many years afterwards, when doing a post-conviction motion, that at the very time he was arrested and before his trial, the New York Police Department had a file, an investigative file in the case. They were investigating the murder. And in that file was evidence, witness statements accusing somebody else of committing this murder. A whole list of people that they believed that the informants believed committed this murder, including Gregory Scarpa, who we now later learned was a cooperating witness with the government, was out on the street committing murders with license from, in my view, based on all the evidence I've seen, Weissmann, Stambolidis, and DeVecchio, the agent, the corrupt agent in the case. So that's just one thing. That alone should have been enough to overturn this conviction. The fact that others were suspected in the case, including one known killer, and that was never turned over to the defense should have been enough. But the other evidence was also compelling, including thousands and thousands of dollars of payment to witnesses who testified falsely against Michael Sessa, hiding convictions, serious convictions for rape and otherwise for one of those main witnesses against Michael Sessa. So all kinds of things. But eventually, I mean, probably the most scintillating, whatever the word is, fact that came out afterwards was that the FBI agent, who was the lead agent in the case, Lin DeVecchio, was then indicted for 4 murders associated with this case. Shocking. Now, during the trial, the case was dismissed against him, but in my view, again, that was a set-up deal. They dismissed the case, the prosecutor, because he said they had reason to believe one witness lied. It was a multi-witness case. There was abundant evidence on each of the murders against DeVecchio. No prosecutor, I wish prosecutors, in my cases, would dismiss a case because a witness lied. It was a routine lie. I'm not even sure it was a lie. It was just that one witness told a different story on 2 different occasions based on misrecollection. But I think that the fix was in with that. To their credit, afterwards, the local prosecutors stood up for Gregory Scarpa Jr., who was a primary witness. And again, in my view at least, it hardly could get more compelling than that. Gregory Scarpa Jr., the son of the so-called underboss, Gregory Scarpa, who was, we now know, committed 50, 60, 100 murders, who knows, with license from the FBI for many of them, and Andrew Weissmann, his son came forward and inculpated himself in a murder he was never even accused of in the past, in order to tell the full story about how Lin DeVecchio, the FBI agent, would participate in crimes with his father, Gregory Scarpa Sr., including murders, including the stakeout, the murder, prominent young woman, nurse, and other cases. Presents that would be exchanged between Scarpa Jr. and DeVecchio, just stuff that's real. It has been the subject of books. I still don't think all of the facts have come out. And but they stood up for Gregory Scarpa Jr., saying that he was telling the truth all along, at no benefit to himself. I don't know. That's a little bit of an overview of the case. Not sure what else we should talk about, in detail. But
Well, David, let me tell you this. I'm sure you know my background, but these were all my friends and associates back then. And
course.
with regard to Greg Scarpa, obviously I was around him all the time. We were both captains back then, and he talked quite often about the murders that he committed. He would brag about him, among us when we were sitting down having a glass of wine, whatever. And of course, we didn't know he was an informant at that point in time.
Of course.
But between him, Andrew Weissmann, Comey, I mean, John Gleason was on one of my cases. I know this crew very, very well. And I agree. I think Andrew Weissmann is the most despicable human being out there. I just don't understand how they keep getting away with this. I just don't understand. And now this guy, Weissmann, is a professor teaching people about the law. When they bring him in as his bulldog, he hides exculpatory information. He frames people left and right. He gets overturned by the Supreme Court and everything else. And yet they just keep moving him forward. I don't
It's shocking.
understand how this can continue with this guy. And now my friend and your client, doing 33 years for a crime he shouldn't be in jail for at all. And this just continues. It's
right.
Unbelievable. It really
He's
is.
my friend also, besides just my client.
Yes.
I think very highly of Michael Sessa. No, it's true. I met once a couple of years ago with a prosecutor who worked at Main Justice with Weissmann, where he went after this. And he said to me he felt the same way. And this is a guy coming from the DOJ. He said he can see Weissmann sitting in his chair. He was talking about a case where a guy was also unjustly indicted in a case that Weissmann headed up. And he said Weissmann would just sit back in his chair and say, F the evidence, I don't care, indict the guy. That sort of thing. He's just a sick, sick guy, in my view, and completely corrupt and morally, ethically bankrupt. And the idea that they used him on the Mueller Commission really, to me, was the linchpin of how I knew how bad that commission was. Everybody who knows this guy Weissmann has to, if you have anything to do with him in the context of a case, you have to see just how checkered his sense of ethics and so on is. Even the prosecutors who have worked with him, they laugh at him at times. I was talking to a guy who told me about a deal Weissmann broke with a client, and he was chuckling. This is a lawyer. Now, I don't happen to have a high opinion of many lawyers, to be perfectly frank. But I was shocked that this guy was laughing about something like that. It was a deal would have set a guy free or, send him away for the rest of his life. And I said, how can you laugh about this? He said, because Weissmann is so evil, there's no other reaction you can have but to laugh. I disagree with that kind of reaction, frankly, but I hear the guy's point. He is that evil. But here to have, the widow of the person who was killed standing up for Michael Sessa to say he just didn't do it. And she knows he didn't do it. They were friends. She knew the friendship and so on. But the stories about what DeVecchio and the prosecutors allowed Weissmann to do are just shocking. You may well know Frankie Sparacco has come forward and written a long letter describing it. And he has said, look, he was a top echelon confidential informant, as they call them, TECI. I know you know this very well. And he has said that these agents and prosecutors gave him Frankie Sparacco, license to commit 12 murders on the street. And this is how they practiced. They fomented this so-called war within the Colombo family. DeVecchio picked a side. Remember, he was caught because when somebody was killed, Larry Lampesia slammed his fist down on the desk and said, yes, we're going to win this thing. The other agent said, we? Who's we, Lin? What's going on here? And that's how it started, the unraveling of him. But there was still no accountability for him. The only semi-accountability is that the Justice Department was required to change all of the rules on the handling of confidential informants and cooperating witnesses because of this case, because of the corruption in this case. Nobody could bring back the lives that were killed. Grancio, I can go on and on, name the people, innocent people who were killed because of this corrupt relationship in order to serve Gregory Scarpa's agenda or Lin DeVecchio's agenda.
Well, no, many of my friends were impacted by this, and it looks like to me now, that it was DeVecchio and Scarpa that instigated that whole, Third Colombo War. They did it all.
Yes, I think
It,
so. I think
it's
so.
unbelievable. I remember having a conversation with Jerry Shargell, who represented my father on a couple of his appeals, and he mentioned Weissmann back then.
Yeah.
I think this is such a long history with Weissmann and these guys. I just, you know what, David, I don't want to sound naive because I've been on the street for so long. I just don't understand how this can keep going on and yet there's no accountability to it. I'm so angry about all of this because I didn't realize the extent of it until Michael started sending me all this information and I see how bad it really was.
And
And how do
that's
we
the
hold these
important thing.
people accountable?
And you're someone who knows this system. Can you imagine the public out there doesn't believe this could happen? They think a prosecutor is honest, decent, and so on. They have no idea any American ought to be offended by what happened in this case. Not to say Michael Sessa was a choir boy or something like that. That doesn't matter. Everyone's entitled to presumption of innocence. He was charged with a crime he didn't commit, and he's given up 33 years of his life over that because of that. And nobody cares. That's what it seems like. One judge after another. One judge sat on it for years. That judge died, turned it over to another judge. Within 2 weeks, she turned down his petition because many of the judges in the Eastern District come out of that prosecutor's office. They don't want to believe this about Weissmann, or they know it and they've covered it up all these years. I don't believe for a second that John Gleason and George Stambolitis don't know just how bad Andrew Weissmann is. I know this prosecutor, Ellen Corsella, who worked on the case, does. She provided an affidavit. But you say no accountability. I think part of the problem is the system. The judges don't take it seriously enough. You ask for Brady material, they say, well, the government's aware of their obligations. And I always say, yeah, they're aware of their obligations. They just have no intention of fulfilling them. And the judges let them get away with that all the time. I also think part of the blame lies with the lawyers. The lawyers aren't willing to really go to the mat to take down a prosecutor who's corrupt because they'll say, well, I have another case with him, or I have another case with the office, or they're going to hold it against me, or the judges don't care. You've got a couple of judges there who care. Judge Corman, he cared, and that's why he allowed all of the evidence that came out to go before the jury in the following case, the cases that followed Michael Sessa and Vic Arena, and all of those people were acquitted because of it. He also wrote about Gregory Scarpa Jr. and the risk that he faced and how he came forward and was truthful. And finally, in around 2014 or 2016, he entered an opinion finding that it's very likely that DeVecchio and these folks provided information to Greg Scarpa and others that got people killed and all that. Still no accountability, but at least it's out there now. If you were to read, and I'm sure you have, but if the public were to read Leslie Crocker Snyder's lengthy opinion, she was assigned to be kind of a special investigator after the DeVecchio case was dismissed. She wrote a lengthy, almost treatise about how bad this corruption was, how deeply it went, and all of that, and still nobody was held accountable for it. And so, Michael Sessa has been trying to get out based on this evidence. Nobody will give him a hearing even on this evidence. They point back to a hearing in 1997 when Judge Weinstein, even back then, before this stuff was really known, said this is a close call, but he refused to overturn the conviction. And since then, in his opinion, by the way, he didn't believe it would be possible that an FBI agent would have been feeding information to a mobster to commit murders and all of that. That just didn't seem possible. Well, of course, after that, we know 100% it was true. And still no judge gives a hearing. And they say, well, Judge Weinstein was a great judge. He found all of that. Judge Weinstein would be turning over in his grave if he knew the evidence that actually had come out. I appeared before him once in this case, and he said to me, well, I wouldn't believe anything Carmine Sessa ever said. Carmine Sessa was a primary witness for the government and source of information for the government. Why didn't he tell that to the government back then? At one point, Judge Weinstein, who was a great judge, in comparison to others, sort of threatened me. I went forward with Shargell and with Ben Brafman, each had individual clients, and I wanted to file a Rule 33 motion and then save the 2255 if we didn't get relief. He said, well, if you don't file them both at once, I won't look kindly on you. I'll never forget this experience. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear you say that, Judge. By the time I got back to my office, he faxed me an apology. He was wrong. Michael Sessa was entitled to get 2 bites of the apple. It didn't do him any good because the judges don't seem to care. If I were a judge and I saw this kind of corruption, I would say, not in my system. You cannot allow this kind of conviction to stand if you care at all about the integrity of the system. It tears down the integrity of the system for anyone who cares enough to look at it, period.
Well, David, it's funny you talk about Weinstein because I remember back in the day, we all wanted to be in front of Weinstein because we thought he was one of the few judges that would buck the prosecutors. He would
That's right.
he would stand on principle at least. So it's at least it's good to hear that. But man, that whole department was corrupt back then. I mean, I was indicted by them. The whole department was corrupt. My father, we tried for years to get him out on a case David, I'll tell you this. My father was no angel. I was no angel. But that case that he got 50 years on, my dad was innocent of. No question in my mind. We went through every witness. Every witness told us, exactly what went down, that my father was innocent on that case. We can never get the case overturned. And we were in front of Judge Jacob Mishler at that time, who gave my father, 50 years, 225s running wild back then. And when I got indicted, they put me in front of Mishler.
Wow.
And he hated me because there was some story out there. The FBI came to me on the eve of one of my father's, hearings in front of Mishler. They came to me, they took me out of my office and they drove me around and said, we have word that you have a plot to kidnap Judge Mishler's daughter. Dave, I didn't even know he had a daughter. It was total nonsense. I said to him at the time, did you make the judge aware of this? We said, yeah, we had to, they told me. And I said, what did the judge say? He said, well, I'm not believing it, but I'm not discounting it. That's on the eve of my father's motion in front of him for a new trial.
Yep. And a judge in that position has no business sitting on it. Same thing happened with Judge Garifas. They accused this guy, Vincent Baciano, of having so-called planned a hit on the judge and all that. And the judge stayed on the case. It wasn't true. A guy made up the story, but they stay on the case. This is where you say, nobody cares. They figure with your father's case, well, if he didn't do that, he must have done something else. The end justifies the means. And that's not how our system works. And you ask about accountability. So I mentioned before, Chief Judge Sifton makes this finding in one of the Russo cases. And he said Andrew Weissmann should be reported to the bar. His sense of ethics is myopic and so on. The U.S. attorney, Weissmann's boss, wrote Judge Sifton a letter, and he said, please, Judge, you've singled out Weissmann. Please take his name out of the opinion. You could hurt this young man's career, so on and so forth. And Judge Sifton buckled to that. I have a copy of both of his orders and the letter from the U.S. attorney. That's pretty shocking. And if it had been included, maybe Weissmann wouldn't have had this career that he's had, taking down so many innocent lives and hurting so many people.
And knowing all of this, about Weissman, all the talk out there, knowing all of this, all the times he's been overturned by the appellate courts, they now bring him into the Mueller investigation to go at Trump.
Shocking. Absolutely shocking. I said at the time, if I were to pick a lawyer who's the last guy in the United States that should be on that commission, if you want the public to believe in it, it would be Andrew Weissmann. And he basically ran the thing. I mean, Mueller was out of it, as we now know, and knew at the time. There were all kinds of conflicts of interest in that commission anyway. But no, that's shocking. And to put him as a commentator on TV, and as you say, he's teaching courses, I saw that he was actually on the panel to give a seminar on ethics among lawyers. He went with a prominent firm from Chicago. Either they don't know about his background, they don't believe it, or they don't care.
Unbelievable. Well, what do we do now? Look, and I know, David, you've been so, intent on this with Michael, helping him out for all of these years. What do we do at this point for him? I mean, it's such an injustice that this man remains in prison. It's
Right.
horrible.
I'd like to think that the president of the United States would care about this, frankly. He's well aware of Andrew Weissmann and how bad he is. In the first Trump administration, there are newspaper articles about this. There was a pardon considered for Michael Sessa and Vic Orena, and then apparently someone in the White House counsel's office pulled it off the table unfairly without ever consulting with me or trying to learn the facts at all. I think this is the kind of case that really ought to appeal to this president because he has the sense of justice that he has, to see, two innocent men in prison for all of these years. You take, Vic Arenas and has complete dementia, doesn't know who he is, where he is, any of those things. And so, I'm hoping that they really would be considered for pardon. The only other alternative is seeking compassionate release. And so far, haven't gotten any place with that. The judges come out of the Eastern District Prosecutor's Office and they don't care.
Yeah, Vic Orena, I know him since I'm a kid, 3, 4 years old. I mean, he was very close with my father for many, many years. And it's a shame. I mean, I understand he's in pretty bad health. He tried to get a compassionate release. And even there, they're stopping him. I agree with you. I think President Trump has a sense of justice. He knows better than anybody how evil these prosecutors can be and how they can work together, and even how corrupt the FBI can be at times. Hopefully, that's being cleaned up at this point. But these two men really do deserve a break here. And man, I just hope it works out. I really do.
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to stop with Weissman. David, I take it personal. I just can't understand how somebody like this can keep going on and on and on and never be held accountable.
Yep.
It's what I said about all of this stuff. People don't understand what they did to Donald Trump over these past 4 or 5 years, how they tried to destroy him, kill him, bankrupt him, his family. And people say, well, he's going on a revenge tour. It's not a revenge tour. It's an accountability tour. You can't
That's what I
allow
said.
these people in government to continue with this kind of behavior. They're destroying people's lives, and they're supposed to be fine, upstanding citizens upholding the law properly. And they just can't keep going on. And I pray that Trump, really, really intercedes in this and gets this done, because it's a shame that it's continuing to go on.
Well, you're 100% right. Think of Letitia James. This is the person who ran for Attorney General of the state of New York on a campaign of getting Donald Trump. He wasn't even under investigation. And now she wants to cry that, oh, this is revenge and this is politically motivated and all that. Incredible hypocrisy. It's accountability, just as you say.
And what about Comey's role in all of this? Does it go deeper than maybe we talked about so far?
Yeah, I really don't know. I've never really gotten much information on Comey's role in this. I'm very familiar with a number of other people, including Valerie Caproni, who was made a federal judge, John Gleason, who was made a federal judge. I'll tell you an irony. Gleason now, I suppose, in his effort toward penance for what he did as a prosecutor, became a decent judge in some ways on the bench, and there's a famous case in which he ordered exculpatory evidence turned over. But now I read an article about him in the newspaper that he's actually doing some compassionate release petitions for people. So I wrote to him and I said, Mr. Gleason, what would be the best way to fulfill this need or desire that you have? Go file a compassionate release petition for Michael Sessa and Vic Orena. Wouldn't even respond to me.
Did he respond?
Nope, never responded.
Well, you know what? I'd like to take a shot at that too, because he said some fairly good things about me after being on my case, and I'd love to even have him on and talk about it. Really, if he could participate in that and help in some way, hopefully he'll dig down deep inside and understand, because he knows as well or better than anybody. Anybody that's around Weissmann has to know what he's truly all about. No,
Absolutely.
no doubt about it.
Yep. You're right.
All right. Well, David, listen, I appreciate it. I know what the next step is in your plan, and hopefully it works out. And any more support that I can give you, I'm here in any way, shape, and form. My goal is like your goal, to get our friend and your client out of prison because he doesn't belong there. And
Well, you're
we'll do what we
terrific.
have to do.
It's a very important story, and you're terrific to give it this kind of popular forum. It's very important. This is the only way the public's going to learn about these things.
No, that's
Thank you
it.
very
And
much.
and the more I'm telling you, I think in my lifetime, maybe you'll agree with me, I've never seen more people leery and questioning the government than ever before in my life. I
Right.
think it's coming out more and more because you know what it is, David? They're so open about it now.
Yeah.
It's like they don't even care anymore.
Yeah.
They're just so open. These guys get up and they lie and they lie and they lie and they don't even care, and they have this attitude. I don't know what's going on. I've never seen it like this
No,
to
it's
this
never been like
degree.
this, I don't think. I think you're right. Well,
And
thank you
people
very much for
see it.
having me on.
Yeah, people see it. So thanks a lot, David. I appreciate it. We'll stay in touch.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Great job.
Take care now.
Right.
All right, my friends. You know what? You hear these things and you say, did this really happen? In our criminal justice system, can this really happen? Can somebody be framed like this? Can a prosecutor suborn perjury? Can an FBI instigate a war where people are killed? Can an informant get such grace that he's allowed to commit 50 or 60 or 70 murders under the nose of the corrupt FBI? The answer is yes. This really happened. This is the system that we have. And you say, these people don't get held accountable? Well, it's time that they do. I mean, it's a fact. Lin DeVecchio was involved in murders, along with Greg Scarpa, a captain in the Colombo family, along with me, a guy that I sat down with 2 or 3 times a week, a guy that bragged about murdering people. And the FBI allowed it to happen. And then they take it a step further. They indict people and they suborn perjury and they hold back information that could, exculpatory information that can get these people released, prove that they don't belong there. And they hold it back. And then they go on and they further their careers. Andrew Weissmann, scum of the earth again. He's now teaching. He's teaching at a university. It's ridiculous. It's a shame. It's a sham. And somebody has to put a stop to this. And I hope it's our president, because he does understand, because he's been victimized by it. Him and his entire family. By the grace of God, okay, they didn't get to him all the way. They put him through hell, but they didn't get to him all the way. And he was elected president again. But he knows this system. He knows how much they lie, how bad that they can be. And hopefully the FBI that we have in place now can see that they're doing the right thing and trying to straighten all this out. But man, it gets me angry. It gets me angry because I watched my father do 40 years for a crime he didn't commit and destroyed my entire family. And now I'm watching my dear friend, Michael Sessa, 33 years in prison, doesn't belong there. And I hope the president sees through this. I really mean this, because it's Andrew Weissmann's fault, Lin DeVecchio's fault, and all the judges at that time that cooperated to cover this all up. And this goes much deeper, and I'm going to prove it to you. You've seen David Schoen. He mentioned Greg Scarpa Jr., who is also an associate of mine. I am going to be interviewing Greg Scarpa, and what Greg Scarpa Jr. is going to tell you is going to make your hair stand on end. Information that he provided that was verified to the FBI back then, and how they just let it go. They could have prevented a major catastrophe. And you know what that catastrophe was? 9/11. They could have prevented it. And in order to protect their despicable FBI agent, Lin DeVecchio, and in order to cover up and not release the people that should have been out of jail through that Colombo War, they kept it quiet. That's right. Absolutely. And I have the evidence and the proof to show you this. I don't speak out of turn. This is only one step. We're going to go further. But right now, it's all about my friend Michael Sessa and President Trump. If you've been listening to this, David Schoen is a man of integrity. When he brings something forward, it's because he knows it's the truth. And in this case, Michael Sessa should not be in prison. He's done all of this time. He should not be in prison. He deserves it because perjury was suborned in his case. Evidence that would have put him out of this case was held back by Weissmann and a corrupt FBI back then. And he deserves to be on the street. And I really hope the president looks at this and does the right thing, because that is the right thing to do. He knows. Weissmann came after him too. He knows what a dirtbag this guy is, in plain English. That's all I have for today. And yes, people, I do get emotional because I understand this system. I really do. And you know what? People that take an oath to uphold the law should not be allowed to break the law to further their careers. And that's exactly what they did in this case. They broke the law. They suborned perjury and they destroyed lives. And it's time that it stops. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. And President Trump should hold these people accountable. They don't deserve to be on the street. They're the ones that deserve to be in prison for breaking the laws. That's all I have to say today. And I'm telling you, this is my appeal to President Trump. I really mean this. I hope this gets in front of him and that he does the right thing. And that the Andrew Weissmanns and the Lin DeVecchios of the world cannot continue to do this. And other people too. The Adam Schiffs, the people like this, they get up and lie and try to put people in prison and destroy their lives. They should be held accountable. Comey, held accountable for what he did. You know, that's what our system really should be all about, accountability. That's it for today, my friends. How do I always leave you the same way? Be safe, be healthy, and God bless each and every one of you. God bless Michael Sessa and his family. God bless Donald Trump that he does the right thing here, and I really mean this. And I wouldn't ask him to do it if I didn't believe in it, and I didn't know it was true. You heard David. You heard what he had to say. So God bless these people that the right thing is done and that people are held accountable, and those that should be let free are let free. And that's my friend Michael Sessa and Vic Arena too. Come on, Vic Arena, compassionate release. He's in terrible health. He shouldn't even be in jail. Shouldn't be there. Let's do the right thing here. President Trump, I'm appealing to you. Please do the right thing in this case. Yes, people. I'll see you next time. Take care.